This is lesson 4 of chapter 11, Path of the Just, details of the trait of nikius, or cleanliness. We have been going through enumerating each level of cleanliness. In our previous class, we were able to actually get started into this idea of the prohibitions involving speaking and hearing, meaning that cleanliness, as we learned in the very beginning, the effect of our cleanliness has to do with our environment, who we hang around with, and what we think about, and what we say and do. And so this idea of cleanliness, bringing our cleanliness to the higher level, means that there are certain things that are prohibited in our speaking and our hearing. Just avoiding situations that would contaminate or cause you to become contaminated. And we left off in the last class with this idea that that all the sins among the sins of the mouth committed through mere speech, and yet on their account alone, the fearful decree was promulgated. My Lord shall not rejoice over their young men, and he shall not pity their orphans and widows. Therefore, the undeniable truth is, as taught by the words of our sages of blessed memory, that lewd speech is actually arva, or an illicit act of the mouth. So the idea of illicit speech is really an illicit act. Does it make sense? It's more than just, it's not harmless words. It's an illicit act. It is forbidden because it is inherent form of immorality. Like all the matters of immorality, aside from the act of immoral cohabitation itself, although these matters are not punishable by permanent death or by a court-imposed death penalty, they are nevertheless forbidden matters on their own right, aside from the fact that they instigate and lead to the primary forbidden act itself. So the idea is this, is in setting a fence around Torah, if we know that there are forbidden relationships in our life, then we go above and beyond the call of duty not to entice ourselves into those forbidden relationships. As we said, we don't go with the opposite sex outside of my marriage. We don't go with opposite sex alone. Those kinds of things. We just avoid them altogether. And so the next level up is not only do I guard the proximity of not putting myself or we not putting ourselves in a compromising situation, we don't even speak things that are illicit because it could lead to that very same action, right? Now, I know that we all say, especially guys are this way, they'll say things that they shouldn't say, and they just generally put it into a category of, well, it's a guy thing, we don't mean anything by it. But the honest issue is that out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. And so we're attempting to purify at the highest level the nikius of our neshama, our heart. And if we're going to do that, we have to guard what comes out of our mouth. By guarding what comes out of our mouth, which is a gateway, we're also guarding our heart. We're keeping from things being stirred. Because if you don't speak it, you're not at some point you won't conceive it, right?
You got to keep it out of your.
You got to keep it out of your thought processes, right? This is the line with the precedent set by the laws of the Nazir, which the sages mentioned in Midrash that we cited above. Having discussed improper speech, the Ramchal is now going to turn to the prohibition against improper thoughts. Now, we're talking about now to the highest level of cleanliness. Concerning lewd thoughts, the sages already stated at the beginning of our lecture, as found in Avodah Zarah 20b, in which this work is based. When the Torah states, you shall guard against anything evil, which is found in Deuteronomy 32:10, it means that a person should not think lewd thoughts by day, thereby come to ritual impurity at night. They also said, sinful thoughts, lewd thoughts, are more severe than the sin itself. And this idea is expressed in an explicit verse, which says, the abomination of Hashem are the thoughts of evil. Now let's pause for a second to think about that. So if illicit speech is really an illicit act, then according to Hashem, illicit thoughts are just as evil.
Thinking about doing it.
Thinking about doing it. Right.
Exactly. That in itself is an act.
Right. So this is the question, can one avoid, is it possible for one to go through life and never think an evil thought?
No.
No.
I don't think so.
No. When you figure that out, let me know.
Yeah.
However, I do know that the higher level in the use a person begins to practice in their life, these things become less of a challenge because you're guarding the gateways and Hashem gives you special abilities to combat that. The Ramchal sort of sums all of this up by saying, now we have discussed Nikyus in regard of two severe transgressions whose offshoots people are likely to stumble in, which we said earlier, these are two of the most difficult areas, what you think and what you say. And because of the strong inclination of a person's heart toward them, due to his desire for them. Now we're going to move to the Nikyus of forbidden foods. On the third level, after theft, illicit relationships, in terms of a person's coveting them, are the foods whose consumption is prohibited, whether regarding the non-kosher foods themselves or regarding their mixtures or the mixture of non-kosher food with kosher food in a ratio that renders them the mixture forbidden. So the idea is, here's the statement. A way to a man's heart is his stomach, right? And Hashem knows that too. Isn't it amazing? He's such a wonderful creator of the universe, figured that out. And if he wants your heart, then he's got to somehow affect what goes into the stomach. So let's move on. Regarding the consumption of milk and meat or forbidden fats or bloods, or even kosher animals, regarding foods cooked by an idolater, regarding foods prepared in non-kosher utensils belonging to idolaters, and we go down through this whole thing regarding the libation, wine with ordinary wine. In each of these areas, the attainment of Nikyus requires great precision, and it requires fortitude. For among the challenges one will face, there's a heart's natural craving for good food. There is the monetary loss associated with refraining from the forbidden mixtures and the like. And there is the fact that the details of Nikyus are as numerous as all of their many laws, which are known and which are clarified in the book of the halachic decisors. Despite the challenge, it is vital to meticulously observe these laws. One who is latent with these prohibition in an area where the sages said should be stringent, it'll actually corrupt the soul. So did the sages expound in the verse, do not contaminate yourselves through them, lest you become contaminated through them. So pause for a second and let's just talk about the effects of forbidden food in a person. What you take in is what you are going to get out. And then we're just talking about a natural, just a natural eating process. Healthy eating, you get healthy food in, you get health out. But in a Kabbalistic view of food, in essence, you are elevating that food when you eat it. Not only are you elevating the food, but you are receiving from that food its energy. You're actually taking its energy. Now, when it says you're elevating that food, that means that food is being able to be used for a higher purpose. So we learned last week that even if a person is to take food in their mouth without saying blessings, then you're not really elevating the food. You're stealing it from Hashem, right? So it's at such a high level, we guard even what we put in our mouth. We talk about what goes out of our mouth. But if I am hungry and I am living my life at the base level of materialism, then I'm not going to check myself when it comes to where I eat. I'll just eat wherever I want, and I'll eat whatever I want to eat. Now, these prohibitions obviously do not exist to the non-Jew as an obligatory thing, but at the same time, there is a tremendous amount of spiritual connection to how we eat. There's a great benefit. And so the best way to understand this is in the same way that we guard our mouth and what we say and our thoughts and what we think, then we guard our intention of our food. What is the intention and why are we eating these foods? And knowing that pure foods bring in purity into our bodies. That's all there is to it. Very simple idea. So let's move on to NICUs in matters,
If you're elevating when you eat the good stuff, are you going down when you eat the bad?
Absolutely.
So that's why the animal fat.
Absolutely.
The big fat.
Okay, yeah. Let me say that. Yeah.
got you.
Yeah.
That makes
No,
sense.
I know, but I must say it. When we eat foods that are not kosher, we are consuming the negativity of that non-kosher animal. Even that animal, the animal's not evil, okay? I'm not saying it's evil. But you're taking upon yourself the negativity. I was surprised when I saw research the other day, and this is why science uses pigs to do medical research on, because they're so much like a human being in many ways, except for they don't sweat, I think.
Correct.
And so all their poisons is in the muscle tissue. And so no matter how much you cook them, one consumes the poison of that animal. And we all know where animals live. As a matter of fact, I'm kind of getting to the place now that even if it's kosher, I want to make sure that the animal was treated right. Right? Because I don't know that there's a guarantee. If just because it has kosher on it, it does not necessarily mean it was not raised in a industrial
That's
setting.
the hard part.
Yes, ma'am.
Two parts. I get confused in the definition of the Shama and the Fish.
Okay.
So tell me that. Then I'll ask my
Yeah.
question.
Okay. Nefesh is the normal energy that of the soul and the mind that you have. Everybody, even animals, have a nefesh.
Okay.
And the Shama is the divine spark of Hashem in you.
And do plants have
Nefesh.
the fish?
hmm
Okay.
Everything.
Everything that's living has.
I would say everything
I'd say
has
everything,
nefesh.
because technically even these molecules are from something.
Right. Everything is filled with molecules. A rock has nefesh. So that's why when they say rocks have souls, or plants and things have souls, what they're talking about is nefesh, meaning the molecules of Hashem, the energy, the atoms, are in everything.
That animates. Yeah.
Well, I wouldn't even say animates it.
Dust is
Dust.
is it.
Yeah, I mean, a rock is not animated.
Correct.
You can't get any more non-animated product than a rock, but it contains molecules and atoms of the Creator.
Aren't they? Aren't the molecules and the atoms?
Yeah, they are arranged in, right, exactly,
Everything
exactly,
constantly moves.
right. So it's just, this is what's amazing is when we're getting off subject on it, but this all sort of relates to our food. Everything that around us at some level is an illusion, because it's all the same material.
It is.
It's all. Have you ever taken you remember those when we were kids? I don't know if they have it now, but you had a little magnetic stick, and it had these metal shavings in it, and you would form it.
Oh yeah, I like those.
You'd form it to make whatever you wanted. Remember that?
Yeah, and then you go lift
What
it
was
up
that?
and drop it.
Sketch it or something like that, right? Well, think about it. If you can picture this, the metal shavings are the atoms,
Correct.
okay, and the pin is the energy and the sustainability of Hashem, right? Whenever that's pointed at something, you can create whatever you want. All the metal shavings are the same. They're all the same. So you can say, hey, look, I just made a pyramid. Well, you didn't just make a pyramid. Those are metal shavings that look like a pyramid.
Exactly.
So the whole universe is filled with that. So, which means that if Hashem has created food for our betterment, then it's better that we eat those foods because it sustains us at the level that He wants us to be sustained in the physical world. At the same time, if we take on food that's not proper, then we take upon the negativity of that food. So, yes.
More and more grocery stores, I've noticed, are offering the humane certified
Right.
and kosher eggs,
Right,
eggs that are free range, and
Right.
they're almost double the price. But
right. I don't know. I would rather pay more.
Yeah. And I think, Betty, you're right, that more and more are, and I think the more that we go for that,
That's right.
the more people
I agree.
that will. And that's
I
the
agree.
same thing with Hashem and how He's going to do it on the earth.
Right,
Sometimes
The
I
more of
know
us that
they're sold
purify.
out, which is a good sign.
Correct.
Because then they know they have
Right.
to order more next
And
time.
that's-
I mean,
I think
if you
that's a
think
good-
about this, let's take we've seen industrial farms for chickens or cows, right? I mean, there's some cows that literally stay in that metal pen their entire life, and when you eat of that animal, even if it was kosherly butchered, the negative energy that animal had to live through, you're taking into your body. And that is what Hashem is talking about when we are to guard ourselves about what we take in. And this whole idea of nikyus means, okay, yes, it might be kosher, but if this chicken lived with 6,000 chickens in a small area in which most of them were crippled and were sent to the butcher crippled, you are now eating the negative energy of a crippled, maimed animal. I mean, that's disgusting. Yes, sir.
Speaking of cows, the criteria for, let's say McDonald's in particular,
Mm-hmm.
buying their meat, is that they take the cow's temperature. If it's within 2 degrees of normal, skinny, fat, whatever it is, they're going to butcher that cow. And all they do is take the ribeye out of the backstrap,
Mhm.
keep that, and everything else goes in the hamburger.
Really?
It doesn't make a difference how poor the cow is, or anything. If it's temperature, it's within 2
Right.
degrees of normal. They just grind it all up. And
Oh, wow. So now, do you understand the difference between kosher and glatt kosher?
Yes.
Glatt kosher. Yeah, glatt kosher means that they actually inspect the lungs. They go through, and if there is a single spot on the lungs or one of the vital organs, the animal is not considered kosher. Now, it can still be used in butchering, and other people can use it, but it's not glatt kosher. So if you want to get the best meat, knowing that it's been inspected to the highest level, because normal butchers do not check the lungs and all that stuff.
That's the most
They don't even care. It is very expensive. So
How do we, as a Noahide, I don't have a kosher kitchen, and yet I prepare food
Mhm.
and bring it for last night,
right,
bring it for
right.
tomorrow night.
Right.
How do you,
Well, because of the fact that the vast majority of people there are b'nai Noach, it doesn't matter. Now, at the same time, if you knew that there were observant Orthodox Jewish people coming, then it would be important for us to let them know this is not kosher, even though it is kosher standard, kosher in the sense that the food was purchased kosher. It's not kosher because it was made by a non-Jew.
It's just like I have a couple crock pots. One has been had the meat and one hasn't. And that's what I was talking to Shannon about. She said, "Can I eat this?" I said, "I've never cooked meat."
Right. So, but some people, now the thing is some people, it depends on what place of halakha Orthodox Jew is at. I mean, Rabbi Greenbaum won't touch any of it. As a matter of fact, if you purchase him food, he's got to open the packages and cut it himself.
Correct.
Okay, but at the same time, there are some modern Orthodox that will say, well, that's silly. I'm not going to do that. As long as I know that it was prepared kosher and it's kosher food, I'll eat it. So there's different levels of it. But the whole idea is it's when we cook for someone that you know that is very observant, we just let them know. This is all kosher products, but it was not made with somebody in a kosher kitchen. So therefore, technically, it's not kosher.
Right.
Does that make sense? Just making sure we follow through. And it's important for the people of the nations to know that, so that when we have community events together, that we know those things. Okay, let's go on to this idea of relating to human interaction. The Ramchal implies that the concept of nikiyus to sins stemming from their interaction between people. He will immediately list the most common sins of this category, upon which he focuses in his ensuing discussion. We'll now discuss the common sins that originate in human interaction associations. For example, hurtful speech, humiliating one's fellow, causing a blind person to stumble by giving him wrong advice, gossiping, whoremongering, hatred, taking revenge, vain oaths, falsehoods, desecrating the name of Hashem. It says, for who can claim I have cleansed myself of these sins, or I have purified myself from being guilty of them? For their branches are many and are exceedingly subtle, so that avoiding them is an arduous task. Now, let's go back through some of these ideas. Hurtful speech, humiliating one's fellow, causing a blind person or uninformed person to stumble. Blind person does not mean necessarily they're blind. Mm-hmm. Gossiping, hatred, taking revenge, vain oaths, falsehoods, or taking Hashem's name in vain. Mm-hmm. Let's look at this first level of hurtful speech. In general, definition of hurtful speech is this: to say to one's fellow, even privately, something that will result in him or her being embarrassed. Right? So it's akin to how we understand the law of Lashon Hara. Right? It's like, right. Even though you take them aside, and even though you say it kindly, if you humiliate them, embarrass them, you've got to analyze whether this is hurtful speech. Make sense? Now, there are some times that the truth hurts, right? Truth is very painful. Now, the problem is how do you tell the truth about something without humiliating a person? So that means that we should be on guard. That's all that means. Just be careful. When you get ready to say something, guard what you have to say, measure it, think about it before you say it, put the brain in gear before your mouth goes in gear, and go, okay, is this going to hurt them? And what is my motive behind it? For example, if I'm going to tell, let's say that somebody here in the community, I need to let them know something that's very harmful that they're doing in their relationship.
According to Torah.
According to Torah, not according to my opinion, but I know the Torah, this is forbidden, you shouldn't do this. And I pull them aside, and I say it very carefully, like I'm very concerned. I see you in this relationship, and they get their feelings hurt and they get upset. Have I practiced hurtful speech? No. Why? Because my intention was not to hurt them, but to save them.
Right, exactly.
Right? To save their life. Now, if I know that this person's disposition is not at a place that could ever receive correction, nor would they change anything even if they had the correction, it then becomes hurtful speech if I go into it with the knowledge, knowing they're not going to change, they're just going to get offended, and they'll go on and continue doing what they're going to do. So what's the point of even saying it to them in the beginning? So there's sometimes you'll look at a situation and go, it'll cause too much trouble. They're not going to listen anyway.
Even though you're going to talk truth.
Right.
They aren't receiving.
They're not going to receive it. You're going to hurt them. You know you're going to hurt them with the truth.
And you have to be wise.
So that's what we have to be wise to, is this hurtful speech? Okay. If someone was a penitent Baalei Tshuva, one should not say to him, remember your past deeds. You remember when you were not a righteous person, right? Or how about this? Remember the deeds of your ancestors, right? The reason why that you're like you are, thereby shaming him explicitly. Likewise, if someone was beset by illness, one should not say to him in a way like Job's friend says that, possibly you've sinned or something negative has happened to you. So that's not good. If a donkey drivers were soliciting grain from him to transport for pay, okay, I'm sorry, let's go back. Remember, please, with the innocent person, which innocent person ever perished? Where have upright people ever been obliterated? Thereby, this is Job 4:7, thereby implying that he deserves to suffer because of his sins. If donkey drivers were soliciting grain for him to transport for payment so that they could earn the delivery fee, he should not say to them it as a prank. He shouldn't say as a prank, go to so-and-so and sell the grain, and when he knows that this person never sold the grain. So the idea is even anything that would humiliate a person is wrongful speech. Can you think of any questions on wrongful speech before we move on? Let's look at the severity of verbal injury. The sages of blessed memory have stated verbal wrongdoing is worse than financial wrongdoing. For regarding this hurtful speech, this verses state that you shall fear your God. Vayikra 25:17. But regarding that of financial deceit, the verse does not state, and you shall fear your God. This applies even when done in private, and it is surely more severe if it is done publicly. We have learned explicitly in the Mishnah in Avos 3:11. It says, "One who humiliates his fellow publicly has no share in the world to come." Two neshamas are severely affected by negative speech and by hurtful speech. The person you spoke it to and yourself. Now, why is it just as important to avoid negative speech even if it's in private? Even if the other person doesn't hear it? Why? Hurt yourself, right? Yes, sir. Is that what you're going to say? Yeah. It said hurt yourself. Gives you an attitude. It destroys yourself. The Ramchal summarizes the lesson to be learned from this discussion of verbal injury. For all of these statements that I have cited, you can see how far-reaching are the offshoots of sin and how severe its punishment. So, let's look now at the use of advice. Regarding the giving of advice, we learn in the Torah's Gehinnom in Vayikra 19:14, when the Torah states, "And you shall not place a stumbling block before the blind," or what does this refer to placing a stumbling block before the blind? What does this mean? What is placing a stumbling block before the blind? Who's blind here, I guess, is the question. What's a blind person? Is that a person who's...
Understand.
Right, is this a naturally visually impaired? Most of us,
Yeah,
okay.
that's true.
Yeah, okay.
So a lot of things.
But it's not necessarily speaking of a visually impaired person,
No.
okay? Someone doesn't know Torah, someone is not at the same level. That's why we have to treat with extreme chesed, loving kindness, everybody that we come around, because you just don't know. I mean, so the best thing to do is to avoid altogether any type of interaction that would destroy or hurt someone. So if someone comes to you and says, "I want a mentoring," even if a person comes and says, "I want a mentoring relationship with you," does not give you permission to now become open and hateful toward them or hurt them. And Rabbi Abraham Greenbaum, a beautiful, wonderful man, in which I have asked on many occasions and expressed my gratitude for allowing me to have the kind of relationship that he could correct me or whatever. But to this day, he will not do it unless I ask him. Right? And even when I ask him, he's so cautious and careful about every word that he chooses, he would never just come out and say it. He's very guarded on how he says it. And then he gives me a chance to ponder it, right? And then he'll come back and ask me what I think. And then he'll suggest maybe we let it rest for a few days. He brings me, he leads me to the place
I think he had
of
good
knowledge.
teachers.
Oh, he had wonderful
He had
teachers.
to have, because-
Rabbi Nachman of Brizlov
Yeah,
is,
that's what I'm saying,
you
he
know.
had to have.
So what I'm saying is, even in a situation of mentoring a person, learn how to communicate.
What's this here? An experienced and trusted advice.
Exactly.
Yes, yes. So let's before we move to the next one, let's throw one more level of musar in for those who watch who has families. Everybody here, most of our children are already gone out of the house. Is it possible that a mother or father can practice negative speech or harmful speech, hurtful speech?
Oh, yeah.
Right. Harmful speech is not just saying harmful things. It's communicating it in a very harsh way, right? The hardest thing for us to do as parents is to learn to communicate our frustration with our children's behavior without anger and frustration. That's the hardest thing, okay? We all get there, but that is the hardest thing. If a parent can master their mouth and their mind, control and discipline their mind, their thought process, to not just react to a situation, but to be tactical about a situation and to examine what's going on. And then when you see that child, you're going to go through the process logically and express to them what it is without emotionally tagging into that thing. You avoid hurting the child. That is the reason why so many children, and I've said this, my wife and I have said this over and over, I would rather have my 30-year-old son be my best friend than have him resent me for the rest of my life because of the way that I communicated to him. Right?
Oh, yeah, because that would deter his whole life.
Right. And there are parents who don't know how to transition from being a parent to a peer either. And so what happens is you have, you know, it's like my mother of blessed memory, no matter how old I got, she always thought that she should critique how I dress. Right, Melanie? I'm telling you the truth. If I happen to come out of the bedroom visiting and I don't have my belt on or my shirt's untucked or I'm wearing a T-shirt or something, and we're in their house, she's like, oh, that doesn't go together. You shouldn't.
I'm not finished.
Yeah. But my mother never did that hatefully, okay? So I'm not.
She's just trying
She's
to
being a
get
mom.
it.
Okay,
Exactly.
I understand that. But at the same time, what I'm talking about is this idea of our speech and our verbal communication, verbal energy in our relationships are very important. I think parents sometimes or oftentimes do not think that applies to them because they're parents. Because that gives them the extra power to verbally castigate and abuse people. I think sometimes in law enforcement, I was in law enforcement, and I think law enforcement officers think that their position gives them the opportunity to verbally abuse people. And I never felt that was appropriate. And obviously there are times in that situation you have to speak the way you have to speak, you have to do it. But it doesn't give you license to humiliate people and embarrass people. And I have seen it way too often.
Character, yeah.
And then, if you're treating your child that way, they learn this is how you parent, and then they parent the same
Right.
way, and it
Agree.
just keeps going.
Yeah, it's a big vicious. It is. It is.
And
It is.
That's how you do it.
yeah, I was wrong.
If anything, the best thing, if you can get to the place where you can have a sense of humor and discipline your child, man, you really got it.
Yeah, it does. It helps.
Yeah.
Now it does.
If you can do that. That's tough, especially when you're upset at them. Let's look at giving advice. We're going to cover this one and then we're going to close.
Pushing all your buttons.
Yeah, oh, yeah. No,
Try one, and it doesn't work. They try another one, they try another one.
that's why you have to be consistent.
Yes, you have.
Consistent. I mean,
I agree.
I know that it's hard, but to look at, and I can remember with my children, forcing a smile and going, I'm actually bigger than you, and you're not going to win. So, bottom line, you're not going to win in this, okay? So you can continue being silly, but you're not going to win in this. I win. Well, it's not fair. Well, life's not fair. Right? It's not fair. It's not fair when this happens and all these things and other people do this. Like, well, it's tough. Life's that way. Right? The best thing that you can teach your children is life is not fair. right? I'd ask them, who gave you the great holy book that says life is fair? Life is generally pretty bad, and you pay your taxes and die.
That's pretty real.
Yeah.
You gotta throw in a few good things, you know, a few compliments, you know.
But that's
There's some sprinklings of goodness.
Yeah, there is. You gotta boost up the ego a little.
I hate to say it, but
Yes.
yeah.
That's where women come in.
No, but the thing is my children knew that I made the point not in anger, but in a sense of humor. Just look, you're just not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. I remember the first time, and I've told this before. My daughter, she's about 11 or 12, and she's coming down the stairs in one of her 12-year-old, 11-year-old moods. About that time when a young girl starts getting moody, you give them permission by going, oh, that's girls. But I'm like, no, it's my daughter, and I don't want her to be moody. There's nothing more annoying than a moody person, right? So she comes down the stairs, and she's doing that, you know. Right, you've all seen it. And I said, whoa, 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 whoa. I said, what are you doing? And she stops, she goes, gives me that look like I just fell off a nut wagon, right? And I said, what are you doing? She's like, what do you mean? I was like, go upstairs and come out of your bedroom again and not mope. So she's like, goes upstairs, boom, shuts the door. She opens the door, boom, comes down. Now she's like irritated. Now it's like moping irritation. And I was like, no, stop. We did it 3 or 4 times. And finally she comes down and she's smiling, right? And I was like, that's good. Whether you're faking it, doesn't matter to me. Just come on down and have breakfast. So the point is I think that sometimes we just should have our correction just bathed in loving kindness.
You know what's sad though, is that some kids don't even get that attention.
No.
And that's what's wrong with our people today.
Right.
You know, they don't even get, be it negative or be it positive. They don't
get
any
negative.
attention.
They don't get negative or positive attention,
And
and
they don't
therefore,
know what to
Right.
do in order to get any kind of attention.
right.
You know, and that's
And
why
if
this
you
is
have
good.
to do a negative with the child or anybody, start with find something positive to say first.
Right.
Exactly.
But I don't know. You know, I went to a private school, and the head, whatever master or the principal, used to use this sandwich discipline psychology thing on us, and it would be so painful for us young boys. We'd be in trouble over something, and you remember Daniel Smith? He would come and he would say, "Well, you know what? You're a good young man, and you have great penmanship." And I'm thinking, oh. I'm thinking, it's coming, right?
What are you better
Right. And he would continue on with so much praise, and you knew that the shoe was going to drop.
I couldn't even hear all the praise.
No, I couldn't, because it was the only thing you could hear. You could see his mouth moving, and it was like, oh, no, that's all you could hear.
What did I do wrong?
Yeah.
So the amount of praise you knew was going to be.
It was torture. It was torture. No, it was a balance, but I think I would have rather been just picked up and punched right in the head, because it was a lot, because you know what it is that type of correction creates a very strong environment of reflection, because now you're seeing, here's this adult who's praising all these good qualities, and yet he's getting ready to discipline me for something I've done wrong. It just puts everything in perspective. It's a very powerful way to correct.
Well, what about just, I love you, but
I'm going to kill you. No, no, I'm just
I
picking.
don't like you right now. I do something
I love you.
I love you, I don't like you very much.
Yeah,
Right.
I use that one a
Because
lot.
you did so and so and so and
Right.
so, and this is.
Right.
And then explain why. Yeah, and then
Right.
you have to explain why.
Great.
No, absolutely. I think you just should be straight up and do
I
it.
do too.
Okay, so let's look at the nikios of giving advice. We're going to wrap it up with this. Regarding to the given advice, we learn in Torah's Kohanim and Vayekra 19:14, when the Torah states, "And you shall not place a stumbling block before the blind." And we talked about who this refers to. It says, for example, if someone asks you, the daughter of so-and-so, what is the status of her lineage regarding her permissibility to marry a Cohen? Do not tell him she is permissible when in fact she is prohibited. Or if someone is seeking your advice, do not give him advice that is inappropriate for him, but is advantageous for yourself. For example, do not advise him, sell your field and buy yourself a donkey with the proceeds when you actually are manipulating him and will use this opportunity to acquire the field from him. So the idea is this: always suspect the person who's giving you advice that benefits them more than benefits you. And so that's why we should be careful about our advice to people. And this covers all areas. It covers relationship with people at work, our children, our spouses. If we are attempting to manipulate someone, that's witchcraft. We have to avoid doing things for the wrong reason. And so we have to do it. So let's look at two more examples here. That whether this advice concerns a matter in which an advisor could be have a personal interest, such as in the case of one who wants to buy a field, or the advice concerning a matter in which advisors has no personal interest at all. And as such as the case where a Cohen inquires about the halakhic status of a woman, a person is obligated to put the one seeking his advice on track in pure and clear truth. Regarding the exposition from Torah's Gehinnom that he cited above, the Ramchal discusses the subtle nature of this prohibition. You can see the Torah understood the underlying motives of swindlers. For in the prohibition, we are not dealing with fools who would offer advice whose unsoundness is well known and who's readily apparent. Rather, the Torah is addressing those who are shrewd at doing harm, who give their fellow advice basically for the purpose of swindling them, doing negativity. I can't imagine anybody in this room even doing something like that. But I think at the level of nikiyus or cleanliness, we make sure that we check our motives behind our advice, right?
That's what this means.
That's what it means. Just check your motives behind your advice. If you're advising somebody to do something, but your motive is to manipulate them to do something that sort of in a way benefits you, just avoid it.
Okay.
Avoid it, right? I think that should cover lesson 4 of chapter 11. Lesson 4 of chapter 11. We'll go into next class. Yes, we're going to go into the nikiyus of Lashon Hara concerning gossiping, gossip mongering, and disparaging speech. And as a teaser to it, whenever someone comes to you and says, "I'm not speaking Lashon Hara, but," it's Lashon Hara.